Hey there, welcome back to Marcelian&Flame. I have a question for every warrior out there and those looking to play warrior. Are you happy with the class? If you're not S tier in damage, do people invite you to groups? And I'm not even talking S tier damage here. Fury warriors, how is your damage right now? Arms warriors, are you fighting with red paladins and unholy DKs for a spot? Protection warriors, you're fine, right? You don't need anything else, right? The conversation surrounding warriors and their utility, group value, and overall performance in the game has been going on for years. And outside niche seasons where the tuning just happened to be really good for one of the warrior specs, the class was almost dead when it came to group viability. I've had it up till here. I'm not asking for much here, man, but I just want one of my all-time favorite classes to not feel like the leftover scrap in the class design where we just get little crumbs to keep us from starving and asking for more. Shouldn't we be cool, look cool, and do cool shit like all of the other classes out there? I think so. So I've been thinking about this for years, talked to a lot of people over the course of the last few expansions, and everyone pretty much agrees Warrior needs a rework. The fact that it's on the verge of getting one might not be entirely surprising given the confusing design choices we received in this expansion that were met with mixed feelings at best. At least I hope to God the devs have this on their list, because if they think Warrior is fine the way they are, then we are screwed. What I will be talking about in this video are the problems I have encountered over the years of maining Warrior and the solutions I believe we need to make us desirable classes in a group and not just a token class because there just happens to be a slot open in the raid buff department. That's just sad, and I already opened my vault this week. WoW is at a crossroads right now, and after the sketchy release of 11.1.5, it's clear people are hungry for some goodwill from Blizzard, which is what this video also is trying to accomplish. If you like the topic, maybe even want to see this for other classes as well, consider Colossus smashing that like and subscribe button. Maybe if enough people see this, we can at least start a conversation again and put some ideas on the table. The ideas, however, have to solve a few problems that I believe Warrior is facing right now. The first and most obvious one would be the group utility. There is none. I'm sorry bro, but Shockwave is not why you get a warrior in your dungeon groups. Demon Hunters have Chaos Nova, Shamans have Double Stun Totem, Monks have Leg Sweep, Mages have Gravity Lapse, Warlocks have the Shadow Fury, and almost every other class has one more AoE crowd control ability that is way better than any of the things I just mentioned. Stormbolt has counterparts in 5 other classes, Fear in 3, AoE slow in... there is an entire spec in this game that has permanent AoE slow on everything and doesn't have to spend a talent point for it. This brings us to the second main issue, possibly more realistic in terms of being fixed with a rework. Warrior actually has a few utility abilities, not the best out of all of the classes, but good enough, and those are locked inside incredibly costly talent paths that you will never take because they compete with damage nodes. I thought we already solved this issue with so many other classes and so many other reworks, but Warrior seems to be behind the times. There's no point in giving Warrior utility and value to the group if they cannot get it, and even if they could, making it completely replaceable by half of the other classes in the game with a superior version of them begs the question, why even bother getting a warrior in? And the last main issue I believe warriors have is a weak identity. This encompasses what I mentioned so far, but also so much more. What are even warriors in WoW today? What is our thing? Our shtick? We are not the only dual wielders, the only 200 DPS, the only shield tank, the only mobile player. So what are we? There is a lot of fantasy around warriors that has been tapped in the past and forgotten to the ages. Do you remember Gladiator Stance? A unique talent that could make prot warriors into an almost DPS spec with a shield? Not to mention how cool it would be to have a Spartan-like warrior that deals damage while wearing a shield. But that's not what I'm asking for even, but a solid rework akin to what other classes have been getting to make warriors happy, feel like the badasses they thought they would be when they picked the class. And also, bring some value to their groups outside of Battle Shout that affects tanks and the occasional melee DPS that somehow got lost and invited into the group. So what should the rework have? Brace yourself because this is going to get some people mad. And I know the red paladins out there will boil in their boots. First, let's talk about shouts. Whether you play warriors in World of Warcraft, barbarians in Diablo, or other types of warriors in other types of fantasy games, shouts are a staple design, and for warriors they have been nerfed and nerfed over the years to the point where now they might as well be called soft, gentle whispers, lovingly caressing your ears and telling you it's time to wake up from that sweet dream of yours and go to work. Battle shout. Keep the 5% attack power, but add one extra thing to it. It can be a 1% crit chance, a 1% move speed buff, or better yet, an inverse of the hunter's mark by making allies do 5% more damage to enemies below 20% HP. I think the coolest thing would be if these effects are choice nodes in the talent tree, so you can have some options on which one would suit you and your group better, although I reckon the crit might be better than all the other ones. Rallying cry. My, how the mighty have fallen. If the devs think the 10% HP boost is something also warriors think about when they go about their day, they have another thing coming. How about we add yet again another effect that can be a choice node with some of the options here. How about on top of the 10% HP gain, we also add a 10% healing received. Of course, this, as with any suggestions in this video, are pure subjective and can be subject to tuning. If 10% healing received is too much, just knock it down to 8% or 5%. The idea is for this to feel like an actual defensive cooldown. All that 10% HP is doing is saving you from almost one tick of damage, at least in dungeons. The bleeds and dots that would benefit from a defensive cooldown hit for about 20% of your HP per tick. Having a 3-minute defensive mitigating half of a tick of a dot seems so incredibly useless, it's bordering on the grounds of an insult at this point. It adds 10% additional max health to your current health value, so in absolute terms it also heals you for 10%, but that is a mathematical masturbation I don't want to get into right now because in practice it means jack. Another effect we could get on top of the 10% health is a 10% damage reduction. Power Word Barrier from Discipline Priest is on the same cooldown but double the amount of damage reduction. The only other thing similar would be the Paladin's Aura Mastery, Holy Paladin that is. If 10% damage reduction is too high and might impact the identity and value of stuff like Aura Mastery, lower it to an 8%, or simply make the effect of Rallying Cry be 30% HP instead of 10 and that's it. If the desired effect would be to boost everyone's health bar to a point that it saves them from a dungeon mechanic, how about we bring it to the present with all the other mechanics that yo-yo our health every time they hit. Piercing Howl hasn't been talented once, I think, and its usage is so niche compared to what you have to sacrifice for it that it's hardly warranted. Let's add a 10% attack speed decrease for the affected enemies, or a 10% cast speed decrease, or both. It would be similar to the Warlock's Curse, only AoE, for a limited time and on a cooldown. Sure, slowing by 70% is strong, but when do you need that slow in modern WoW? If anything, you want mobs to be faster so they can group up quicker and your DPS killing them quicker. Tanks don't kite anymore, where slow would be ideal, and kiting isn't fun and never was. Why have a spell that solves a problem that doesn't exist for a game design nobody wants? Or we could have a talent node upgrade for it that transforms it into a disorient instead. No more slow or any of the other effects, but rather a demoralizing roar from druids. All of these effects could be implemented as choice node talents or simple reworks to the spell, although the choice nodes are more interesting if we can alter the functionality of a spell based off of the content that we do. Berserker Shout is currently a choice node with Piercing Howl, also a dead talent. First of all, we don't have AoE fears in the game that we cannot stop. Every AoE fear in the game is stoppable one way or another, or otherwise an incredibly poor encounter design outside one exception every 2 expansions, like the first boss of Mists of Tirna Scythe. The baseline effect is cool, but there just isn't enough content to make you use it. Also, this at least needs to be 30 yards or bigger. Who wants a fear removal for the melee group only, assuming the healers and range don't just hug the tank all the time, completely eliminating the reason they are there in the group? If your group wants a fear removal for a few people or with a pretty serious condition, just get a tremor totem at that point, and everybody removes the fear no matter what they have to do, and they don't have to hug the tank. Something way more accessible as a talent choice also. On top of the 30-yard increase, add the Torghast effect to it to heal you back. When you pop it, all friendlies affected heal for 1% of their max health every time they deal damage with a spell or ability, up to a total of 10% max health. It's thematic, has an effect that doesn't just happen but requires player input, so it isn't just a free buff. Bitter Immunity is yet another dead-on-arrival talent. I think when it was initially added, it also removed bleeds. People barely played it then, it got nerfed, so of course this is just a hole in the talent tree now. Bleeds have made this season difficult to heal and defend against, especially for some classes, so Warriors being the one of the two classes that could potentially deal with it seems so cool and iconic and a lost opportunity. How about we modify this with one of two effects? Make it a 5-minute cooldown and remove all debuffs present. It says immunity in the name. What the fuck about the current version of this is immunity? Remove all the debuffs and reduce the damage taken by 5%. It would be a warrior thematic ability by making you tougher and having a real effect in modern combat. It would be similar to Paladin's Divine Shield, just that it would have a longer cooldown and not actually make you immune. So drawbacks in comparison are present to make it different. Intervene has been shit for 2 expansions. We needed an entire legendary for Protection Warriors to even get people to play it. What did the devs think would happen when they took that away and made it costly to talent into? Make Intervene generate 10 rage first and foremost. That way, any spec that uses it gains value in their rotation. Second, make it offer the target of Intervene one of 2 effects. Either give them Spell Reflect for 4 seconds so that you can deal with magic encounters, or 5% damage reduction for 10 seconds. In Shadowlands, we had a conduit that made it add 10% damage reduction. Not even asking for that, just a measly 5%. Speaking of Spell Reflect and Shadowlands, what about Mass Reflect? It's pretty strong as a concept, so we can add drawbacks to it. It can replace Spell Reflect as a spell in your spellbook, have a 2-minute cooldown, and work on only 5 people. If this breaks raid encounters and makes warriors 1 per group mandatory, make it a 5-minute cooldown. Reflecting 1 spell every 2 minutes or having the 20% magic damage reduction for 5 seconds is not a big deal. Not to mention that devs arbitrarily decide what is reflectable and what is not anyway, so that can just be their tuning knob. Bring banners back. Varian Rin in Heroes of the Storm has banners as a warrior. Necrolords gave warrior banners in Shadowlands, and I'm not even gonna go further back in time. Give us 1 banner. But we can choose from a few versions. It can be a 3-minute cooldown baseline, and if you want, can have a different effect based on each spec. Conqueror's banner can be the Necrolord banner we had before, gives a mastery buff, move speed buff to your party. The amount of mastery can be tweaked to not be broken, and it can last for something like 10 seconds. Berserker's banner can give you a crit buff and remove impairing effects. The fantasy of a Berserker is it cannot be stopped and just wails like a madman on his enemies. Protector's banner can give the party 5% damage reduction and an additional 5% damage reduction from damage over time effects on top of a haste buff. The reason these pack a damage buff is because of how modern WoW cooldowns behave. I'm perfectly okay with just these being utility, completely removing the stat buffs. This next one is incredible that it didn't make it into the game yet, and if you think I'm tripping, note that Warcraft Rumble, the mobile game, has this ability in it. The fucking mobile game based on the goddamn MMO. Christ, bro. Warriors need Mak'gora. I'm an orc fanboy, but have no problem extending this to all of the races. This can be a 5-minute super thematic cooldown that does something unique for each of the warrior specs. For all of them, you will taunt 1 target for 10 seconds and engage in Mak'gora with that target. For Fury and Arms, this will just not work on bosses and maybe dungeon lieutenants. As protection, you will make the target deal 5% less damage to everything other than you. But you will also deal 5% less damage to everyone other than your Mak'gora target, encompassing the fantasy of a duel to the death with 1 enemy. If the enemy dies during its effect, you get a 1-minute buff that gives you 10% more health. That's it. First of all, it can be a defensive cooldown for your group, giving everyone a 5% damage reduction from likely a boss, which is not the end of the world. And if you use it in a dungeon on random targets, you can gain a nice little tankiness buff that won't break the game, but make you feel like a Warcraft warrior for it. On Arms and Fury, the damage reduction would have to be 50% and apply to you as well because, you know, this is tricky. You will be actually tanking a target that the tank is supposed to tank, and it has to do way less damage to you, so you don't just die. But the trade-off is that your damage is also borked for the duration on AoE, you essentially dealing, let's say, I don't know, 50% less damage to everything else. These numbers can be tweaked, by the way. You take a target from your tank for it, and if he dies, you get a 1-minute buff that gives you, I don't know, 3% crit chance. And that's it. Fury would get 3% haste. The idea would be to have an epic, glorious duel with the target, and killing it will give you some glory. But the glory cannot be a broken buff, so a little incentive should be a 1-minute buff of 3% of a stat. Also subject to balancing, of course. And last but not least, warriors need a bloodlust, period. Orc warriors were the first class depicted to be subject of the concept of bloodlust, before Warcraft 3 brought it to shamans, and Warcraft 3 to ogre magi, which ironically were warrior units prior to them learning the spell, and after that as well. That aside, warrior, rogues, priests, demon hunters, and monks are the only classes that have neither a lust nor a combat resurrect. When paladins got combat resurrect, it made sense and put the question on the table: who is next? And there has to be a next. Combat Resurrect and Lust are two main criteria for any group, and if you don't have these, you need something equally strong, which ironically doesn't exist. Maybe all classes need one of these eventually, because it's silly to not be invited to a group because of the lack of it. Although it wouldn't make sense for some of these to have any of the two, it 100% makes sense for warriors to have Lust at the very least. And all of these changes came about with one of our warrior friends wanting to play with us, and we realizing, holy shit, there's no real space for us to fit him in terms of what tools we needed, because neither of us play Bloodlust or Combat Resurrect, and it felt pretty tedious to find a way. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people have this issue as well, and warriors have been dealing with these issues for years to come, and they just feel terribly designed all the way. But Windwalker is not that, by the way, and you can check this video out to see for yourself why Windwalker Monk is the best spec for +10s.